A lot of times what some people don't realize is that the labels actually have, and I'm talking about major labels, they allot a certain amount of the budget for artists just for sample clearances and different features and different things like that. Right. So they already know that you 9 times out of 10 may be coming with the sample and they have a budget for that.
This is Digga. He's a legendary Grammy-nominated producer, actually the producer of classics, hip-hop classics, and I don't use the term loosely. I want to say that you're one of the first producers to come out with a book specifically for other producers on the business of music production. Mm-hmm. What's the name of the book? What can people expect from it? Where can they find it?
The name of the book is called The Beat Game: The Truth About Hip Hop Production. You can get it on Amazon.com, or you can get it at thebeatgamebook.com. And it's pretty much, you know, just through my years, just through my experience, I've been, you know, just learning, of course. And, you know, one day I just wanted to dive in and try to find a book about about music production in general, and I couldn't find it. And that's pretty much how I started writing the book. You know, I wanted to kind of write a book that would help producers along the way. I mean, it's called The Beat Game because I love music, I love basketball. So at the same time, I wanted the Beat Game to be like a playbook, you know, for aspiring music producers. Because, you know, I realize in this game, everybody, you know, tends to kind of not want to learn beforehand. They kind of, you know, learn when they get in trouble. So I wanted it to be kind of a reference. So when you got a question about the music industry, you can kind of go to the book, look it up, get the information.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because it's definitely a scenario that comes up time and time again that I witness all the time. Producers even hit me up and say, hey, I'm in this situation where, you know, my record got leaked or my record's been released and there's no paperwork. What do I do? And I think, well, preparedness could have at least given you a foundation insofar as how you address the situation is concerned. But because you're going in with absolutely no foundation for business knowledge, then you
Right.
don't know what to do. And that happened to me, my first placement. Honestly, I didn't know anything. I didn't have a lawyer, and it just happened. And so I had to scramble, and I lost as a result in a lot of ways.
Right. I mean, that's pretty much, you know, what you know, again, I put a lot of information from my experiences, some of my peers, other producers in there, you know, producer Buck Wild, High Tech is in there, you know, even Jake One, you know, he tells a story in the book about how he actually produced the WWE theme music for John Cena and how he actually got beat out for that, you know, as well. So, I mean, I just try to put real life situations and scenarios so, you know, producers can read it and get a parallel. I'm actually working on the new second edition of The Beat Game, which is going to more be about, of course, the streaming industry and how that's going to affect music production.
Is that available for pre-order, or it doesn't have a release date yet?
Not yet. I'm working. It's funny because I'm actually like, it's one of those things that I'm finished with it, but I'm not. You know, every day I'm adding something new to it because I'm seeing, you know, everything is moving so fast. So, you know, hopefully one day I'm gonna wake up and just be ready to go in motion to get it ready for release.
On that subject, and I know this is a crazy question for me to even ask, but you've been in the game for so long and you're still here, you're educating the current generation. What would you say is one of the biggest changes you've noticed in the music industry, a substantial change from when you first started to present day?
Creatively, of course, is the collaboration. You know, when I first started, you had to physically go in the studio with an artist to let them hear the tracks. You know, even to have them record to your track, you know, you had to physically go in the studio. You know, I remember when Pro Tools was kind of just being like the industry standard, and you used to have to rent Pro Tools and they used to roll it into the studio. you know, and on racks to actually use it, you know. So creatively, that was the you know, one of the things, because obviously, I think people can kind of understand the difference with working physically with the artist in front of you, as to opposed to, you know, working online and sending, you know, music via email. So that was one thing, and with that, being in the studio, the financial part is like drastically different. Like, you know, you know, just to go in the studio and, you know, work with an artist or lay a beat down for them to two-track or record to, you know, you had to actually pay a 50% advance fee before we even did business. And that was kind of the industry norm. You know, if I was getting paid $7,500 or $10,000 a track, I would send them an invoice for 5,000 before I would even go in the studio to lay the beat. It's funny that because I've done a lot of production with a lot of different artists. Like, you know, I produced records with Nas, with Method Man, you know, with RZA. I mean, I could go on. That's not even ever. The songs have never been released. Partly that was because of just working and just working with different artists, you know, and that's how you had to do it. If they liked the beat, they would pay you, and then you would go in the studio and lay the beat and keep it moving.
Here's a question I meant to ask you earlier when I was referring to your whole catalog of classic work. What would you say was your favorite record from your catalog?
My favorite in my catalog is probably a record named Pull It. That was Cameron featuring DMX. And that was like a record that actually never, I mean, it was released in, you know, in New York. It wasn't on the Confessions of Fire album because of the sample didn't get cleared. But that was actually one of my favorites because that was like my first, you know, record that actually had a real impact on the streets. You know, the streets of New York City, when that was released during that time, you know, we had a club called The Tunnel in New York, which was the club that Funkmaster Flex used to, you know, DJ at, and that's where records was broken. And like, that was like what they called a tunnel banger, when they would play that record 10 times in a row and everybody would go crazy. And that's what really inspired me to say, yo, I could really do this.
Yeah, I read that you were connected to the Tunnel. I heard a lot of stories from Big Cap, rest in peace.
I mean, yeah, you heard the Tunnel. I mean, again, like you know, we talk about back then and now, like that was another thing as well, as far as you could, back then we used to make music and we could test it in the Tunnel with a group of people, and that would kind of be your focus group. You know, now, you know, everything is online. You throw it up online and it's like you cross your fingers and you got to kind of see what direction it's going to go in. So that's a little different, but those are the type of things that helped me when I was coming up.
So you kind of alluded to a situation with that Cameron and DMX record, which was a sample clearance issue. Sample clearance is still one of those major contentions in the production world. Do you still sample?
Still sample, yes, absolutely. I mean, that's part of the game for me. Never stop.
Okay, I personally like that answer because I've been through the same missteps and mishaps with sampling, and to me, it's just you can't abandon it just because of that. Have you heard a lot of misconceptions and myths about sampling that producers have held? Is that something that you've had to address?
I mean, yeah, you know, of course, in my book, I talk about, you know, a chapter is called Eating the Sample, which is basically when you add a sample into your production, it's kind of like you having a plate of food and now you're inviting somebody to eat off your plate. You know, it's kind of that type of situation. So financially, once you add in a sample, you know, you got to share. You know, in some cases, you might not even be sharing. You might be handing all of the rights over to the person that owns the sample. This part is where I came up from. That's how I learned to make music. That's still what inspires me. You know, I can make a sample, you know, chop a sample up, and that may give me an idea to either replay the sample or play it in a different way where I might not even use the sample, but it's still part of my production process. But as far as on the business end, I mean, I know people say, yo, you know, you need to stay away from samples because the songs might not get clear, artists don't want to pay for the samples and blah, 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 which some of that is true, but ultimately I just feel like you shouldn't let that block your focus, you know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, you want to stay creative, whatever happens, happens. And one of the lawyers that I had early on pretty much told me, if you use a sample, just understand that it might be a promotional tool for you. You have to be ready to sacrifice maybe that one song that may be used, out there that may get you popular. And make sure you have 5 or 10 other beats that may not contain samples that you can come with, to benefit off of the success of the song with the sample.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a great point. I got a tweet earlier today, and it was from a producer who I guess held this misunderstanding of sample clearance that I see a lot with producers, which is something that's perpetuated not just by producers but by, I'd say, low-level managers, people outside of the traditional music industry sphere, rappers, recording artists, which is that producers before selling a beat have to clear the sample.
No. There's no sample police. There's no copyright police, at least not yet. Of course, when you're trying to get placement, specifically on a major label, that's part of the process. A lot of times, what some people don't realize is that the labels actually have, and I'm talking about major labels, they allot a certain amount of the budget for artists just for sample clearances and different features and different things like that. Right. So they already know that you 9 times out of 10 may be coming with the sample and they have a budget for that. So you don't have to clear it. I mean, on the business end, if you have enough money to actually do that, and if you think it's worth it, by any means, it probably would benefit you to step to the creators or the owners, the copyright holders, to clear a sample beforehand, so that you can possibly have more leverage when you're speaking to, when you're dealing with an artist. Honestly, I've never done that in my career. I've never had that type of situation, and I know, I think Universal Music Group, you can't even talk to them unless you have about $10,000 at least just to clear a sample. I don't know how you can do it.
And then the other danger of doing that is, as a producer, if you clear the sample and then the rapper raps something over it that the sample owner doesn't like, they can just come right back and kill the whole record, right?
Right. It's several different things. If the publisher or the owner of the sample, depending on who they are, you may not even be able to clear the sample until they actually hear the final product, for its release. So it's just a lot of different things, and also, if you're not experienced in music publishing and licensing and stuff like that, I think trying to clear a sample is just going to be too much of a headache. Just educate yourself, and if you get into a situation where you have a sample and you get a placement, understand that you want to be able to negotiate and be fair about it, and try to get as much of a percentage as you can without being greedy.
Yeah, and like you said, education is definitely the key, just to walking into those situations and being at least well versed enough to know what you need to do, even if that's outsourcing to someone else, like a lawyer or like a publishing house. But on the subject of education, obviously the producer community has a long way to go. You've seen a lot of bad situations where producers have been exploited, taken advantage of just because of their lack of knowledge, and that's just kind of how the game's set up. It affects artists too, but
Right.
with producers, I think there's almost less information out there just because we've never been in the spotlight to the extent that we are, I would say, in maybe the last 5-6 years now. So it's not this common conversation to have about the business of music production.
Right.
It's kind of been in the shadows, you know what I mean? So